Here. Got sound, we got video. Anybody have a question? Is there a topic to talk about? Randy's here. Keith, thank you. Okay, Wildlife Adventures with Vincent says, when did I start beekeeping? 2006. That's pretty much it. Same time Colony Collapses sort of came out, and they had all of those great documentaries, Silence of the Bees, Disappearing Bees, More Than Honey, all that stuff. Yeah, a little bright. Thanks for thinking I could adjust the contrast and stuff, because I can't. It's this is a Logitech camera. It's supposed to be really good. I had to disconnect my real camera, which I have total control over, just so I could fix this. You know what? I should have just worn a white shirt and it would have darkened down. Oh, look, if I hold my hand up, it gets dark. Well, look at that. Whatever. Wildwoods Honeybee Farms. What have you been doing for winter lately? Waiting for a break in the weather so we could do a oxalic acid vaporization treatment if the weather actually cleared 50 degrees. I was hoping for 60. Didn't happen. Yes, DC's blessed bees. I seem to have some issues. I have no idea what you're talking about. It was perfect. I turned it right on. Came on. Everything's great. The exposure is perfect. Everything's fantastic. Unfortunately, I live in a pretty tight residential neighborhood, so I can't keep bees, but I live vicariously through you. That's from Ajon B. I'm glad that you're not the only person to say that, actually. So I think those who have the ability to post their videos of bees online, I think it helps people that are stuck in suburbia and places like that where they can't keep their own bees, but at least you can go online and see them here. So Robin Coolidge says, 50's here tomorrow, doing my OA. Good for you, Robin. Yay. It's like 40, 41 here right now. I don't know what that is in Celsius. I like to give both. Behaven says, ironic, says, silence of the bees, disappearing bees, then the sound cuts out. Come back, but it's jumpy. My sound is jumpy? Does anybody else have problems with my sound cutting out? Because it better darn well be coming through without being glitchy. And St. John Coleman says, have you tried Randy Oliver's oxalic sponges yet? No, I haven't, because I'm waiting for that to get approved and for Randy to finish up his studies. And those of you who know me know that I wait for it to be legal. I know a lot of people think that's a waste of time, just jump on and do it. But I'm waiting for Randy to finish it up. And his sponges actually look good, so it actually might be approved. You have to stick it down inside your hive. Oxalic acid vaporization is much more convenient if you can get it to work. And if your bees are already resistant enough to the varroa that just a minor treatment like oxalic acid works, then you don't have to take apart your hive and put things in it like extended release sponges. But I know his work is showing really good results. So Anita Setter says, hey, Fred, can't wait to see you at the Hive Life conference. Well, I'm looking forward to Hive Life myself. That is right around the corner. Many thanks to Cayman Reynolds for putting all that together, and he is one busy individual. My only concern about Hive Life is with 1,900 people going, how are we going to have time to even say hello to everybody? So here is, but I'm looking forward to seeing all of you who show up there. I hope we can cross paths and say hello. Brian says, this third grade math class break has been brought to you by Fred Dunn. Inspiring beekeepers want to know, besides their stingers, what is the difference between wasps, bees, and yellow jackets? Okay, yellow jackets are wasps. In fact, hornets are wasps. All hornets are wasps, but all wasps are not hornets. So the difference is honeybees are vegan wasps. You can look at it that way. Plus, they have more fuzz on them, more hair. And the wasps, of course, we get in the classification, they're vespids, Vespidae. And of course, the bees are in the Apis category. So bees are friendly vegan wasps. But of course, they have, you're in the animal kingdom when you break it down like that. But the big difference is wasps are jerks. Although, let me back up because I know there's going to be an entomologist in the group that's going to be mad that we might say something against wasps because they are beneficial. There's a whole bunch of different ones out there. Let's talk specifically about the bald-faced hornet, which is really just a wasp, and they call them bullet hornets and everything else. They are mean. They're highly defensive. They attack people. Yellow jackets attack your bees, so naturally beekeepers turn on those. But when you really get into wasps and looking at all the other species out there, it's a lot of fun to find out the benefits that they do. For example, this is where sometimes yellow jackets make it hard to hate them. I was out looking at a tree that had bagworms on it. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a strong webbing system, and a bunch of worms that eat the leaves off of your trees are in this web system. And the yellow jackets were raiding it, and they cleaned out an entire collection of bagworms quicker than I could get my camera to get out there and document it. It was very impressive. I've also seen yellow jackets fly in on flowers and stuff and nab pests right off the flower. So the only time I go after the yellow jackets is when they come after my bees in the bee yard. Other than that, they're okay. They can be out there. Let's look, new study going on to look at mites on drones in the spring to determine heavy mite counts later in the season. Have you heard about it? That's from Steve White. Haven't heard about that specific study, but if the bees, after the drones emerge from their pupa state, if the varroa mites stay on them instead of migrating over to the nurse bee territory where food is better and resources are easy for the mites until they can move in with another drone or something to reproduce. If it's physically on the body of a drone and the drone flies out, you've got a colony of bees, I think, that's overwhelmed. But I will be interested to look into that in spring. In spring, when the brood is building, so are the varroa destructor mites. These things in spring. Oh, look, maybe that changed my exposure a little bit. But I love seeing ways to take out those mites. But anytime we see them out and about on foragers or drones, if they're on those bodies, then that's a colony that's loaded, in my opinion. And what else do we have? Wasps are jerks, says A. John B. I agree. Yeah, they're jerks. Yeah. Harsh language, but you know what? You got to use it sometimes. What treatments do you like to use? That's from Wildwoods Honeybee Farm. This will interest you. I have almost every treatment you can think of on the shelf here. I've got whole cases of Formic Pro, for example, and I haven't used it at all. And here's why. When I find a hive that needs varroa destructor mite treatment, I use oxalic acid vaporization, and then I do mite counts after those treatments. If the mites do not get under control, then I have my ace in the hole, these heavy duty treatments that supposedly work better, but I've never had to go that far. That's the good news. So it starts with genetics of your bees, their natural resistance, and those who have been bred for resistance to varroa mites. And if you can get away with just using oxalic acid vaporization to get them under control, no reason to go on to anything else. So I've never had that, had to use that ultimate blast. But my next step would be Formic Pro, the pads. And of course, those can only be used on your strongly populated hives. They can only be used during specific weather parameters, and you always have to follow that. And I have friends that use Formic strips, but I don't. Oxalic acid is all I've ever had to do. So let's look. There's some stuff going on. Fred, I have never used fondant before, but this past year I got over aggressive with the amount of honey I took from my hives. At this point, most of them are much lighter than normal. Okay, that's from Mr. Beachbum 5. A lot of people are figuring that out this time of year, that they may have not left enough on. For those of you, oh look, I just happen to have fondant right here. These are the half packs. We put them in Ziploc baggies. And then this is, of course, Hive Alive fondant. Here's what I recommend. It doesn't have to be Hive Alive fondant. I just happen to have that here. There are plenty of people online that give you recipes on how to make it. You have the half packs because you can put those in your nucleus hives and things like that. But here's what I hate to see in the spring. If you don't put some kind of emergency resource on your hive, and you do that spring inspection and find classic evidence that your bees starved to death over winter, that is 100% under your control when it comes to managing your bees. So, Hive Life Fondant is on every single one of my hives except the horizontal hives. My Lands hives, I don't have it, and my Long Langstroth hive does not have fondant on it this year. I could put it on, but they're so loaded with honey and they're well insulated this year, more so than last year. So I think they're going to take care of themselves. But all of my vertical hive configurations, except for my 5-frame nucleus hives, have Hive Life Fondant on them. So, and here Michael Cummings says, how long do you wait after vaporization treatment to do a mite wash? That's a really good question, actually. So I like to give them 24 to 72 hours. And for those that like to do their counts also on insert boards, if you have some kind of tray under your hive, or if you've got a core flute sheet that slides underneath, you've got screened bottom board there that's enclosed, it's really good to look at the mite drop afterwards. So I always tell people that are my mentees, for example, I know none of you are here right now, but I always say clean your bottom boards, clean your removable inserts in the trays if you've got flow hives and things like that, or if you've got a bottom board with any kind of insert, clean it really well, then do your oxalic acid vaporization treatments, and then do a count. See what the mite drop was after, and then that's part of your logging series too. Plus, it's fun to find little mites that have fallen off, can't climb things. That's something I'm really interested in the coming year. I want to see what the damage is from the oxalic acid to the mites. Are they still alive and just unable to get their footing? This should be easy to observe. We're going to collect them. And we're also going to knock them out with CO2 so that I can have live mites to mess with. I'm not going to torture them. Don't worry. I won't torture them. But we're going to hit them with oxalic acid, and I'm going to see if they still run around and just can't climb smooth surfaces, for example. But let's see. And this stuff is moving fast. I'm glad I was able to catch a bit of the live show. Looking forward to meeting you at the fellow squid at Hive Life 2023. Osquatch, fellow squid. That's, for those of you who don't know, that's the highest form of marine life known. Squid, Navy people. Fred, have you ever made your own fondant? And if so, did you video it? If I did make fondant, I would video it, but I don't. I don't want to take the risk of cooking something and risk creating HMF. So I don't want to overheat it. By the way, it's one of the things I like about the Hive Alive fondant. That's a cold process. They don't cook it at all. So for those of you who are thinking about making something to get your bees through winter, you know, they're light. The easiest thing to do is make a sugar brick. You don't cook it, you don't heat it, you don't risk breaking down the sugars, and you won't do anything toxic to your bees. So that's what I recommend. And some people add lemon juice, or some people add vinegar to it. Be careful about the kind of vinegar. For those of you who are acidifying your sugars, some vinegar is just for cleaning. Apple cider vinegar, for example, would be for human consumption and therefore probably safer for your bees. But find someone reputable on how to make that stuff. Don't take chances. Stay cold, stay with sugar, and because it's just, remember, it's just for survival. Let's see, Behind Ruby's Fairing says, so there's a channel that deals specifically with Africanized bees. He estimates that since they have been found in all of the lower 48, within 10 years, all bees will be Africanized. Your opinion? I disagree. Because the Africanized bees, even though they do get brought up north, and we've seen examples of them up here, they can't handle the cold. So they don't handle cold winters like what we have right now. And this is why they stay south. Thank goodness they do. Now, little bits and pieces of those genetics are ultimately going to make their way into other bee lines. In fact, it's a miracle kind of that we're keeping distinctive genetics and lines of bees at all anymore, with all the mixing and all your drones flying off here and there. And that's why some people are actually falling back to just saying northern bees, southern acclimated bees. Dr. Leo Sharashkin talks about bees that are just working with those from his area and not bringing in other bees. So I remember they jumped to Florida, and Florida has the tightest restrictions on queens right now of any of the states. And I think other state departments of agriculture are looking at them as a model for controlling bee genetics. So I don't know if any of you watched when someone wrote to me and said that they were being inspected by a state inspector down in Florida, and they were talking about a spring swarm they had collected. And here we were at the end of the summer, and as soon as the inspectors realized that this came from a swarm, she took his queen and pulled its head off, killed it, because they have a rule there now. You can only get your queens from known genetics. I thought that sounded like fiction. It was actually true. And so they want a list of authorized queen breeders in the state of Florida, and they want you to get your queens from them only. I'm glad that's not what's going on in my state of Pennsylvania. But I understand they've got genetic issues with the Africanized bees. Look how long Africanized bees, by the way, have been in this country and how far they've made it so far. There really is a weather band that kind of restricts them to the south. And I think we have encounters with them when people buy southern packages and things like that, and they bring them north. And so let's see, what else do we have? Local abandoned long hive that has been left alone for 2 years. Okay, have you been following Etienne Tardif's work? Now, it's interesting that Arctic Beekeeping brings that up because he's going to be at Hive Life, so you can talk to him. I've seen a couple of videos of his. He super insulates his hives, keeps bees in an area probably where bees otherwise could not be kept, and insulation is kind of his key for managing bees in extreme cold areas. So he'll be interesting to talk to and hear from at Hive Life. So let's see, Kelly, I'm in Metro New York, New Jersey. How warm of a warm weather day do you need to do an OA treatment? A few 50 plus days or also a rain. Your thoughts. So what's more important, and hello, Kelly. So the thing is, what's going on with the landing board of the hive you want to treat? We want those bees to be active. So if there's a lot of activity, because a day 50, we can say, well, I'd rather like to see it be 60, so the cluster is broken up. But different colonies react to the weather changes differently. So if there's a lot of activity on the landing board and they're flying, coming and going, that would be a colony that I would consider open for treatment. On the other hand, some of them still stay clustered even when it's 55 or 60. So it means a lot of different things to different colonies. But if that's your best window of opportunity, in other words, you're going to get a day that's 50, 55, but for the next 3 weeks, it drops to the 30s or 40s. This is your window of opportunity to get a treatment in there. So I would rather see you do something than nothing, but the more active colonies are going to spread it through the brood area, which is really where you want to hit them good. So that's what I would do. I've been following. Okay, let's move on. Can you talk about turning your sugar into a toxin? Not everyone knows what that is. Okay, so rather than try to explain that, because it's a pretty complex breakdown, after this video is over with, I will give you a link down in the video description rather than shoot from the hip on those parameters, because it has to do with temperature. And I'm going to send you to an expert on that. So for those who want to know more about sugar and if you're heating it, my question is, why bother? Why heat it? I know that people like to create invertase. They like to invert the sugar. Invertase is the enzyme that inverts the sugar. And people like to help the bees by creating invert sugar. And because we've got sucrose and then we're changing it to glucose and fructose, and those remain separate, by the way, and it allows the bees to metabolize them. But I say let the bees metabolize that and create that invert themselves. Stay safe, just give them straight sugar. Let's see, using fondant on my hives, 5-frame nukes are eating it up. 2 weeks, about 75% gone, and 5% on all others. Thanks for sharing the expert interviews. Yeah, you're welcome, Joe. And somebody else, even in my own bee club, our vice president does not put fondant on until much later, and thinks that the bees will find it early and start to consume it early when they still have honey resources, for example. My thought on that is, I don't care if they find it early and have another resource, and then if that becomes consumed and then they move back to just honey, whether they use the fondant first and the honey last, or the honey first and the fondant last, they're still being fed and they're not starving and dying in wintertime. So if you've got enough fondant, and I hope you do, then I'm all about putting it on right now and having it on right now. If they eat too much, oh, gee, that's not terrible in my opinion. I would be very happy with overweight honeybees in the wintertime. So, Penny says, I enjoyed your ground wasp nest removal vid. Thank you. Yeah, I like going after wasps sometimes. How many colonies do you have? Right now, let's see, we at peak this year, we had 29 or 28. Right now, I think I'm at 23. And that's a good number to have going into winter, 23 strong colonies. We had a couple of last minute colonies get robbed out, and they were underdogs anyway. So when we say 28 or 29, those could be small colonies collected, swarms collected at the end of the year, and we're just taking a huge gamble with them. So we're more surprised when they make it. But for core colonies, I'm going to say we're probably at 23 right now. They're looking really strong. What else do we have? If you're in a very cold climate, would you prefer Saskatraz or Italian bees for a beginner? And that's from Mr. Approachable. So for those of you who are looking for a friendly person, Mr. Approachable is right there. But Saskatraz are cold climate bees. Those genetics are from Saskatchewan, Canada. So, and if we talk about Italian bees, Italians are the most common commercially sold bees in the United States. They're considered southern bees. They go into wintertime with big broods. So for me, Italian bees are super productive, but they require a lot of maintenance, feed, and extra care going through winter. Now the Saskatraz, so we only have 2 to choose from. I did get Saskatraz bees. I got them from Oliveira's bee breeders there in California, who at the time were the only authorized source for your Saskatraz line. They sold them through Mann Lake. They had the highest varroa mite counts that I've ever had in any bees that I've kept here. And I've been keeping bees since 2006. So that was really saying something. I was disappointed, but they were super productive. You were going to need to intervene or watch the mite loads on them, while other people got Saskatraz bees and they were the opposite. They had really low mite counts and they were very good at managing that kind of thing. So the problem is they're getting breeding stock from the Saskatraz line, which is pure up in Saskatraz, Saskatchewan, Canada. But they have to breed them here in North America from those breeder queens. So that's where we get kind of the mix. Some of the genetics get watered down. So some people got really good Saskatraz lines, and others like me apparently got some that were a little weaker when it came to dealing with that. But if I had to choose Italians or Saskatraz for here in the northern part of the United States, it would be Saskatraz over the Italians because I'm not into honey production. I would much rather see really strong genetics that can get through winter, that kind of slow down their brood as the temperatures drop and then bring it up in line with what the environment's providing so that we're not having to handhold them with a lot of extra feeding. I don't feed my hives except for the emergency fondant at the end of the year, like right now, unless it's a new colony, new swarm, something like that. Let's see, high 50s, and let's see, high 50s here tomorrow, hoping I can always treat Southeast Ohio. Yeah, if that's your window of opportunity, do it. DC's Blessed Bees. We're in Northwest. We're in Northwest. Are you in Clark County, West Virginia? What else are we doing? Bees channel for local content. This can get hammered fall to winter. What else? Carney can be a good northern bee. Yeah, carniolans. You can look online and see a list of bees and their traits, and those that are identified, you can be very general. So what I'm about to say is very general. Light colored bees. So the more golden and light and blonde they are, the more southern they're said to be. So, hold on just a second. I have to remove a user who decided to say something inappropriate here. So anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so the light-colored bees are considered southern, and the northern darker bees, so even the Russians and things like that, are considered good for northern climate bees, and they handle things really well. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff in between. Buckfast bees, there's all kinds of stuff out there. But yeah, the other thing is there are a lot of people that don't get caught up in specific breed names and types and genetics. They start with what's working in their area, and they continue to work with those, and they collect local swarms. And this is something else that come up recently that somebody asked me to mention. Because I collect my own swarms. In other words, those are the bees that are coming from my own colonies, so I know their backgrounds, and I recycle those right back into my apiary. However, if I get a call from someone who's 15 miles away, they found a swarm, hanging on a tree branch over a bridge somewhere in the woods. If I get those, they do not come straight back to my apiary. They go to somebody else's, or I give them to a brand new beekeeper and let them work out what their disposition is, how well they manage, if they're, prone to illness, if they're not doing well, things like that. I wait to see what their ability is before I bring them to my apiary. So those are the ones I give away. So what do you do about winter moisture? That's from Wildwoods, honeybee farms. What I do about winter moisture is I make sure that I'm using now, by the way, I used to have top venting. I used to have, people are saying Richard is a troll. Well, Richard's gone, so boom on Richard. So when it comes to moisture, I used to have top venting, top entrances going through winter. And I realized that was necessary, by the way. So I'm going to make this distinction while we're talking. If I didn't have top venting, my bees would have been overwhelmed with moisture condensation directly over the cluster inside the hive. And that's because I was not insulating my beehives. So I had the standard inner cover, I had a standard telescoping outer cover, and no insulation. So what I do now, though, is I have an insulated inner cover. And keep in mind, too, I took a bunch of courses at Cornell. And so a lot of people there, Dr. Tom Seeley, for example, were pointing out that bees don't like upper venting. They don't like upper entrances. They don't choose a space. So, for example, if we were putting out swarm traps, and if they had upper entrances and lower entrances, they would be less likely to be occupied by a swarm of bees. So if you had no upper entrance, but only had a lower entrance and everything was insulated, blah, blah, then you would get a swarm over one that had upper venting. So the other side of that is making sure that heat does not escape through the top of your colony. If the colony, here's another key, is small. So if we're talking a deep brood box and a medium super, if you're packed down for winter, insulated inner cover, then no top venting, and we don't have a moisture problem over the bees. Condensation occurs at the dew point, so it's going to be on the inside walls, down low, and of course near the entrance, and your bees are going to use that moisture. So that was the other part of it too. A lot of need for them to get moisture and water when they can't leave the hive. So when it's really cold outside, which is why we have condensation inside, the bees can't fly out, do cleansing flights, or collect moisture and bring it back into the hive. So if they can get condensation inside below the cluster, then it actually helps them out. They need it in wintertime. So for me right now, what do I do for moisture? Insulated inner cover, and then single entrance at the bottom. And last year was a very good result from that. So interesting. But again, climates are different. So wherever you are, maybe some other configuration. So this is another thing I want to say. If you're going to try no top venting and an insulated inner cover and things like that, hopefully you've got enough beehives, you can do what I do. And that is, don't make these conversions on all hives at once. Have some with, have some without, see how they do. And then you kind of get your answer and you'll incrementally figure out how to modify your hives so that you can get the best configuration for the best result for your bees. And last year, we really noticed that they didn't consume a lot of resources. So they were very low on consuming their stored honey. So then you might say, well, why even put fondant on? Because that's an emergency. Because in the event that someone did kick up and some colony did consume all their resources, and then if I pop that lid in spring on that first warm day and they're all stuck in their cells with their little abdomens shrunk up because they didn't have enough nutrition, that would be on me. So I'd rather have them with a little too much than not enough. And with the insulation, it worked great. So, do you do anything special with your observation hives in the shed in winter? Are they large enough for the bees to overwinter like a regular hive? And that's from Steve. Thanks for that question, because that's the reason I changed my observation hives. What happened was, in the past, I got my hives from a company that only sold hives for observation that were in pairs. So all the deep frames were just in pairs. And then you had the glass on the outside. So you really only had the center between those two frames that the bees controlled. And then the outside of those frames just got cold. So the observation hives I have now, and there are 3 of them, they're in triples. So now we have a center frame that is insulated by bees on both sides that has a first and third position frame where their exterior can get cold up against the lucite or the glass or whatever you have. And those are doing extremely well. So the key there was, because it's counter to what a lot of people think when they get an observation hive. I've seen observation hives that are singles stacked one above the other. And that's to make sure you can see everything. Well, my thing is you don't really need to see everything, every surface. If you've got 3 frames all collected together in groups of 3 or 4 high, and you're going to see my latest observation hive at Hive Life, for those of you who are going there, now the bees have so much more control, and we still see everything that goes on in the hive. The queen eventually does show up on that outside frame. They do lay eggs. There is brood. So all the things you need to do to teach people, and that's the building that my observation hives are in. The whole purpose of it is so that people can see colonies active any time of year. And we have, for wintertime, double bubble this stuff. Just, oh, look, that makes my exposure a little darker. Anyway, we have double bubble, kind of like pillowcases over the top of them. And I have just heat centers on the outside of the observation hive so I can see what the building temperature is and then what the observation hive temperature is under the double bubble. And right now they're consistently 10 degrees warmer than the building itself, and the building's unheated. Things are looking good for that observation hive system with your frames in triples. So I hope that helps answer that. What else do we have going? Do you know how many Layens hive frames of bees you had going into winter? Just curious. So that's from Suzanne. And the number of, we did an inspection that I showed. So I made a video about it, which is one of the good things about being a YouTuber and creating videos when you do hive inspections. It showed how many frames I had of honey, and it showed how many frames of brood, and their brood frames were big. So I can't give a specific, I'd just be guessing. I would have to refer to my own videos to look at that. The frames are numbered, but the colony in my horizontal long Langstroth hive going into winter this year has the biggest and healthiest population I've ever had. So plus we enhanced their insulation this year, where before the insulation was in the cover. When we lifted it up, the insulation was up in the top. But then we're looking at the joints that come together. So when you close down the hive, it's that joint that goes all the way around the long Langstroth. If you can see any light through there, then you've got a leak point and cold air going in. So this year, I took this stuff and I sandwiched that. So when the lid comes down, it clamped onto this, and this became the insulation barrier. And I think that's going to make a big difference. So we have a combination of things going on. They have lots of resources. I figured more insulation directly on the cover boards of the long Langstroth would help them retain a heat capsule in there, and then that would give them access to more of their resources, even in winter, even when it's cold, because that colony also only has one entrance. It's at the southeast corner. And if I were building that particular hive again, I would have made that entrance smaller because it's 1/2 inch high by 6 inches long. I would have made it 3/8 of an inch high and 3 to 4 inches long only, because I know more now, even than I knew just 3 years ago when I built that hive. So we're going to see how those things go. And Robin Coolidge says, I have not seen them in your videos, I don't think, but any experience with Apame insulated hives? Yes. So Robin Coolidge, we have Apame hives out there. That company was really generous. They contacted me and sent me Apame hives. So they're out there. And I have to say that the first colony that I put in one of them, they absconded. But I have colonies in Apame hives going through their first winter here, and I'm trying to leave them as designed by Apame. And they're, I forget what the particular line is, but it's their best line. And they have the double feeders on top. I like a lot of the configurations. I did not like that air leaks through the feeder containers that are on top, which compose what would be your inner cover. And then they had open vents on the cover itself and nothing in between. So in other words, they're vented no matter what. Where my instincts are, knowing what I know now, I would have insulated or had some control over venting through the top. And the bees, if they're given enough time, they do seal those little gaps, the little crevices that allow air to pass through the Apame covers. So if they were given the time, the problem is I got those, 2/3 of the way through the year. So next year, I think we're going to have a much better test with the Apame hives. I also really like that the 10 frame brood box for the Apame company, they provided a divider. So I had a small colony in one, and there's a video. I have an Apame page on my website. So when I put the divider in, then I could condense them to 5 frames. And even though it's a 10 frame box, it's really going to behave as a 5 frame. And the bees did much better as soon as I closed that up. Plus, you can put a brood box on top and another divider on that. So you can have 5/5 in what would be a 10 frame. So in spring, as they expand, I can just pull the divider out. Now I've got a 10/10 as they go. So I actually, those are interesting. Testing them, just started it. This is my first winter with them. So I don't have a final word on that. What else is going on? We're interested in separating our hives according to the recommendation in Dr. Seeley's book, which is quite significant. What we would be giving up is wind protection. How important is it? So separation of hives, and that's from Lynn Schultz. The farther apart your beehives are, your colonies of bees, the better off they tend to be. Bees find their homes quicker that way, and there's less drift that way. And so Dr. So if you look at the Dice Lab, the way they've set up all their hives, and that's Cornell University's lab for honeybee studies, they have really separated their hives out there. And so the farther apart they are, of course, we're not matching what bees would choose themselves when it comes to how far apart they would occupy trees, for example. They would really spread out. A lot of studies have been done on that. That's not practical for those of us who are keeping bees in our backyard. But stacking your beehives right next to one another in rows on pallets, as a backyard beekeeper, you don't have to do that. And the farther apart you can place them, the better off they tend to do. So it's pretty good. And the other thing is some people like to keep them all close together, but then just orient landing boards everywhere. But we've also come up with a consensus that landing boards that face south or southeast tend to do better. Now, what else are we doing? I'm only 8 years of beekeeping experience, but the last 2 years I've done away with top entrances and my bees winter better here in Maine. Thank you for your advice. Well, thank you, Storm Rider. And I like that feedback, by the way, because here's the thing. I was just saying this to my wife the other day. I'm so glad There haven't been viewers that followed my example and then come back and said, all my bees died. I hated everything you told me to do. Thanks a lot for killing them. Hasn't happened. I'm really happy about that. Even naysayers in my own bee club who didn't want to admit that that would be a good way to go did what I was suggesting last winter and had good reports in spring. So I love that kind of reinforcement that we're kind of on the right thing. And in Maine and this part of the country, it's cold, it's windy, it's rough on bees. And once we did that, it made perfect sense, and is really demonstrating that it works very well. What else do we have? When would be a good time to check my hives with Hive Alive fondant to see how they're making out? I'm in upstate New York, and that's from Melissa. Okay, so it depends on how you're configuring that, but I hope that people are following my information on putting your fondant on you have your inner cover and then the fondant on top of the inner cover where the hole is up there, because here's the thing. Hopefully that's an insulated inner cover. And when you take off the outer cover, you can look, and when you see the fondant pack, whether it's homemade or whatever it is, you look at the clear back of your fondant and you can see the progress. In fact, the president of my bee organization, we just had a Zoom meeting last night, and he's got some colonies that have consumed 70% of the fondant already. But when you're looking through the top like that, because it's in a plastic seal, you're not letting a bunch of warm air out, and you're not kind of shocking your bees with cold. So you can see it, and if it needs replacement, then you have time to prepare your other pack and cut the little hole in it, lift this up, put the other one right on, and then save what's left over in your other pack for spring feeding. You can even open feed with these, which I did this fall, just to recycle some of the old ones that had remnants in the corners. Plus, it allowed me the opportunity to observe the way the bees get into the corners and use those resources. So you can actually check them at any time. But of course, if it's a warmer day, if you're going to have temps in the 50s, like some people are talking about, or the high 40s, sunny day, then you have an opportunity to see what they're doing. And that's the good news. Now, if you've taken your fondant pack and put it down directly on the frames, that's a different story. Now you're pulling off your outer cover, pulling off your inner cover, and all that heat capsule gets away, and just for you to look at it, because they don't cover the entire top. So that's why I don't put it on the frames themselves. I want to interrupt and get into the bees as little as possible when I'm inspecting, just to see what the food resources are. And of course, have your replacement packs ready to go. So you're taking this apart one time and putting them in as quickly as you can and getting out of there. But people that have their heat sensors and their humidity sensors, brood minders and stuff like that in there on the brood also have shown that that heat capsule that builds up in there can take as long, it depends on the colony size, of course, and this is passive heat. They're not trying to heat that space, but it's warmth that builds up and defeats the dew point up there. We want it to be drier. And so they've been running about 62% relative humidity up there. Now, but when you pull that off, they show that it took up to 8 hours just to reestablish the little heat bubble that's up there, assuming you have an insulated inner cover with no preventing or leaks. So people that are getting information like that, really handy to have, because it does teach us things like that. DC's blessed bees. It's all your fault. You helped me be smarter. Okay. Keith Faithful, many say your bees will die a wet death without upper entrances. I don't, and haven't lost any yet in 3 winters. Okay, so for Keith, I get confronted sometimes by people who think that I'm teaching the wrong thing. And here's my point. And we mentioned this before, but I'll do it again because it's important. If you do not have an insulated inner cover and you're using the standard metal telescoping outer cover, there's no insulation above, you are going to need some kind of airflow through there, or you will have condensation above your cluster of bees. Now, if you have insulated inner covers and an insulated feeder box on top, that cold area does not develop directly over the bees, and therefore condensation, when you get these rapid warm-up days, does not collect and drip down onto your cluster of bees. It runs down the sidewalls, because I don't insulate the entire hives, by the way. I don't insulate the walls and everything else, because remember I said that I do incremental changes. If I did everything all at once, I wouldn't know what part of that worked best for my bees. So here where I am in the snow belt, by the way, Ag Zone 4, I do not insulate the sidewalls of the hives. I only insulate the inner cover. And the reasoning behind that is the insulation may not be necessary, and I want some condensation inside the hive for the bees to collect and migrate into that mantle, that cluster of bees in wintertime, where they're often desperate for water. They can't even metabolize their stored honey unless they get some water in there so that they can deal with it. So it's very interesting stuff, and I highly recommend, again, if you've got multiple hives, don't make these changes on every hive together. Even the things I say, which although they're excellent, don't do it all at one time, because your specific climate may be different. This is interesting too. Somebody was in San Diego, and on really hot days, she kept all of her venting closed. And I thought, wow, that sounds really counterintuitive, because your bees are fanning like crazy. They must be trying to cool down. And they are trying to cool down. But the problem with open venting in a desert climate where the humidity is extremely low is the bees were working overtime bringing moisture in. So not only are they trying to cool the hive, they're trying to keep the humidity up, because they would lose brood. Your brood would lose its moisture. Open brood is critical. It needs high humidity to survive. So she was closing up in hot days because the climate was so dry. So there again, it demonstrated that a single entrance, summer or winter, was a benefit to her bees and helped them control humidity levels, which are just as critical. So there's a lot going on here. It's very interesting. Let's see what else is going on. Small gap under the Leyens divider, just enough for the bees. Yes, I have whatever Dr. Leo sent me. That's the way I'm using it, just to see how it goes. And again, that opening is at the bottom, and they propolis it like crazy. That was the other thing with the long Langstroth hive. I went in there to show someone. We were prepping for winter, and we were going to pull out some of the honey frames. And when I noticed how well they had propolized the entire follower board, which defines inside the hive, it defines what is actually the space available to your bees. They had propolized it so heavily, I decided to just leave it this year. They didn't want any venting going beyond that. And we force them to accept venting when we do what? When we have a space at 3/8 of an inch or bigger. The bees can't really readily close it up. If it were down to 1/4 inch or less, then you'll find out that they'll propolize that stuff if they don't want it. So our bees can actually teach us exactly how much venting they want and where. And Dr. Leo wants you to leave that open, because he actually said it so they can explore the area beyond it and not be surprised when you move that over and allow them access to more frames, that there is more space there. So again, he's the expert on horizontal hives. And so it's horizontalhive.com if you really want to know more about the horizontal configurations and how well they're working. I'm not an expert in the horizontal format. I'm just feeling it out. And Dr. Leo is a fantastic source for that. And uh-oh, I don't have a moderator, Jen Johnson says, who can modify for you. And I have trolling comments here. Okay. So Jen is now my moderator there. Hopefully that will help. And I overwinter supers filled with insulation, but new addition this year is a black Rex box wraparound to Guelph University video, which lets me relax about breaking the seal. Yeah, if you're pulling boxes apart, you're going to be breaking seals. That's a good point. Your bees cannot restore those seals. So the thing is, You do need to, if you're going to get in your hive for some reason in the wintertime, I don't recommend changing configurations in the wintertime, but if you have to open a box and you break the propolis seal, the bees cannot repair that because it's just not warm enough for them to do it. So you would need to wrap them. And somebody else mentioned recently that they were using, the saran wrap that people wrap food in, and boxes are wrapped in when it comes to you. They have saran wrap and they go out and wrap a hive if it was damaged or if there was air flowing through it and the bees could not fix it. That sounds good to me. Saran wrap, that would be weather tight and everything else. So that's good. I know some people sent me pictures. They're using Reflectex or double bubble and stuff like that to wrap their hives. I haven't had to do it, thank goodness. Now, Brett Long says, you use vented bottom boards or solid? If vented, do you close off any amount of it? Okay, now there are a lot of reasons why this comes into play. My favorite bottom board overall, of course, is a solid bottom board that you can close up completely. Some people use screened bottom boards as part of their integrated pest management, meaning that the pests fall through the screen and go out onto the ground, or it goes down onto a tray or an insert. So I do like screen bottom boards if there's a tray and an enclosure or some kind of core flute, some removable sheet under there that also is enclosed. I don't like venting out through the bottom board and having that wide open. I know there's always an example of some beekeeper who lives in, the North Pole and has an open screen bottom and swears by it. But your bees, this is very interesting, by the way. So I hope you'll take a note on this. Honeybees spend a lot of time configuring the frames in the hive using burr comb and everything else to improve the efficiency of their movements through the hive, but also their movement of air through the hive. So when we're talking about your brood box, these are the boxes that I feel should be left alone as much as possible and put back together in the same order as much as possible. And for those of you who change the configuration of your entrance reducers in wintertime, try to, like if you had a wide entrance reducer and you reduce it smaller, try to center that over where the existing opening is, because your bees will spend a lot of time planning their movement of air based on that being the entrance. When some people flip their entrance reducers and the winter size is off to the left or off to the right now, you have just messed up your bees' excellent engineering regarding airflow. So try to keep things as constant as possible for your bees going through winter. Kamina the Coke says, I love Dr. Leo's methods. However, he's catching swarms in the north. I watched a professor from Florida say they have issues with Africanized bees down south. Opinions about catching swarms in the south. Okay, we mentioned that earlier, but I'll mention it again. State of Florida. State of Florida does not allow you to catch swarms and keep the queens that are of unknown origin. You have to have your queens come from, this is Florida, so don't shoot the messenger. You have to have queens that come from approved queen breeders that have queens of known genetics. That's Florida. That's their current rules. Now, I know a lot of people are going to write to me and say, well, I'm not listening to that. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just going to keep my bees any way I want. Well, I'm just telling you what the rules are and why. They're trying to control the spread of Africanized genetics. So in my state, we don't have that. I highly recommend that you understand working with your own bees, collecting your own swarms, keeping your own queens, and knowing their behavior and traits and everything else is a huge advantage. Dr. Leo has that advantage. He recycles his own bees and genetics right back to him. He has 1,000 acres of land there. So a lot of the things that he's doing, he's in a sweet spot. He's the primary beekeeper there. So if you're like me, I have other beekeepers just a few miles from me. We are interacting. My game there is to send out as many drones as I can from my stock to make sure I'm impacting them in a positive way rather than their drones making out with my queens, bringing back inferior stock. I want the local good stuff. And then if we can get all our friends and beekeepers around our area kind of doing the same thing, working towards the same traits, then we get improved stock as the years go by. So there we go. Let's see. Not all areas in the South have Africanized bees. You can search out Africanized bee maps online and check your area. No issue here in North Carolina. True. It's not the same all over the South, everywhere. We have our 4 border states. Big deal with them. Texas is a big state for that, and Florida has had problems. And it's true that it's not the same everywhere else. So that's good news. It kind of leapfrogged, across the Gulf on ships or something to Florida, and they have issues. I'm very glad to live in the North, even though it's cold here and I can't work my bees. I'll trade that. I like to be near a fire, drinking tea and whatever else. So Ohio bees, what else? Sinister hippo. Moved away from that because it leaves horrible residue on my hives. Correlate sleeve is okay. We're talking about something else. Other states in the South opinions. Always just check with, who knows what's going on? The State Department of Ag and the state bee inspectors. They're a great resource. And people that are tracking genetics, a lot of your universities are studying that and where they're spreading. Very important stuff. ML Farm. Hey, Fred, when you move your follower board, if you cut off the propolis and put it in the hive with the bees, do they reuse it? Bees do, by the way. This is one of the reasons I really want to talk to Marla Spivak, the Spivak lab. She knows everything about propolis. The bees do collect, reuse, and move propolis around. And it's interesting, too, because for those of you who don't know, propolis for the population, it benefits the bees. People call it bee glue. And some bees, you talk about traits, some bees collect way more of it than others, and you'll see pools of it on the bottom. And when it's hot, just like if you look at tar and stuff on the roads, and when you get a really hot summer day and it starts bubbling, it's really soft and workable. When the bees get the propolis warm, they move that around too. And here's my question for Dr. Spivak and why I wanted to interview her. How much are the bees altering the propolis? In other words, we know it has medicinal effects for people and bees. And so they're collecting it from trees, very specific trees, by the way, because in spring when they're budding and things like that, the buds are protected by this gooey substance, this bee sap. Bee sap. It's tree sap that the bees use, and they call it propolis. When they bring it into the hive, they can't even get it off their own legs. It's on their corbicula, but other bees have to remove it for them, and then they work it into crevices and joints and things like that. And if they have a surplus, it just ends up pooling around. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, they will, when it's warm, move it around to other places. And it's interesting too, because you'll sometimes see a big glob of propolis somewhere that you may not like being there. But then the next time you go to inspect, this is why videoing and photographing the conditions that you find is really important. You'll see that it's no longer there. Now, does that mean they moved it to another spot in the hive? Are they painting it on the wooden surfaces because they're porous and everything? Those are all things that are left out. But what I want to know personally is, what are they, if anything, amending into the propolis when they're using it inside the hive? Because Dr. Spivak made a comment one time that they don't modify it at all, that they don't add anything to it. So I just want to expand on that. How do we know that? What's going on? And so on. So do they reuse it? They definitely move it around. I've not seen bees flying out the landing board with bits of propolis and trying to get rid of it. It seems to me it's something that would never spoil. They do refresh it. And for those of you they like trivia, the Stradivarius violin has bee propolis in its finish, by the way. Just a little tidbit there. But it's good for the hive, so I like it. And I think they're reusing it. They're also reusing beeswax too, so. How can I stop my bees from killing each other when open feeding? Will putting more feeders out help? This is from James Barron. I have never seen bees kill each other at a feeding station. But if there were dead bees, if they're actually fighting to the death and killing each other, I would provide definitely more feeders. I would relieve some of that concentration of bees, but I've not seen it. I've seen them bite onto each other, and I've seen a bee, try to get away with one bee clamping onto her leg, and but then they break away and break it off, and I've not seen them actually dying at the feeders. So, but I would definitely just provide more feeding space. Yeah, definitely. What else here? Glenn Perkins. Have any thoughts on cleaning out bottom box in Apame Hive? I had to remove all frames last spring to remove all the junk disrupting the bees. So the bottom boards on the Apame hives has inserts and it's got a blocker. There's a space for it to put a pollen trap in, and it's vented too. So I guess the good news is the tray is removable, so you can pull it out and clean it. And that's my other thing. Um, for those with removable trays and stuff like that, I like to have extra trays. The reason for that is if you're pulling out a bottom tray or if you're pulling out any kind of bottom enclosure, we don't want to leave it open so that bees and other things get up in there, because this happens too, that people will close it up and find bees trapped inside. But have replacements so that we're not rushed. We pull out the existing tray with all the debris and all the detritus and stuff that's in there, which, by the way, is very interesting, and then you put a new one in right away while you're there. Now we have all the time in the world to take this tray that we've pulled out, bring it into your bee lab, aka your kitchen table, put all your lights on it, get your microscope out or get your magnifying glasses, see what's in it at your leisure, and then make notes. And it's very interesting to do. This is, again, as I mentioned before, this is my first winter with Apame Hive, so I've not seen this big buildup in the bottom of the hive yet, but that's what I would plan to do. Is just like core flute, when you've got those inserts, have spare inserts that are clean and ready to go. Pull one out. It should have the identifier on it from the hive that it came from, so you can make your notes. How many mites did you find? What kind of bits and pieces of this and that were on there, and identify everything that you can. It's fun to do for those of you who are teaching beekeepers, new beekeepers, and especially elementary school kids. You set them down at the table, you pull all these bottom boards out, which I pulled them out of the observation hives. And in that building, we have a long table, and we sit them all down with lit magnifying glasses and make them tell me, what do you see on these bottom boards? And of course, the new replacement boards have all been reinserted. It's just a great opportunity to see when you find dead mites on there. There's something called the Purdue ankle biter bees that chew the feet off of mites. It's a lot of fun to look at the physical condition of the dead mites on your bottom boards, trays, and core flute, whatever you have, and look to see what their condition is. So it's a lot of fun, great opportunity. But yeah, I haven't had a problem, yet with things building up. I like the idea that the bottom board of the Apame hives has a bunch of holes in it, because if moisture really built up in there, it would, of course, find its way out rather than just backfill and sit stagnant. So it's kind of good. What else are we talking about? Wonder if they recycled, very cool. Wonder if they recycled propolis, DC's Blessed Bees. Wonder if they were removing propolis that has either lost properties or has become contaminated. You know what they do with the propolis? First of all, because they don't spend a lot of time removing it, they do thin coats on top of it. And so it's like if you've ever seen stone that's in the side of a mountain that's cut away, you see all these strata layers, then you can see that on propolis too. If you cut through it and you look at the side of it, you can see that there's layer after layer of really thin layers of propolis. So they kind of varnish it themselves. They refresh it themselves with very thin layers. Super interesting stuff. Here we go. James Barron, mine find constantly in Texas, so they've probably got some Africanized genes. Have got a pile of dead bees just from fighting today. You need to have a talk with those bees. They need to get along. So, and I don't deal with Africanized genetics, so I can't say that you're wrong on that. They may be very defensive towards other bees. We know Africanized bees do some pretty bizarre things that other bees don't do. For example, they practice usurpation. For those of you who've never heard that, the queen moves into an established hive, with her little retinue of her own little feisty Africanized worker bees. They kill the existing queen and she takes over the whole colony, including their brood, their workers, and everything else. It's called usurpation. It's very interesting. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that they can expand so fast. They swarm a lot too. That's why, and the colonies tend to be smaller because they're swarmy and they have this ability to take over less defensive bees. Not good stuff. But and the other thing is, they were starting this whole database of the physical traits of the Africanized worker bees. So they were, using micrometers and everything and measuring all their appendages, and they were starting to get a database going. Now we're at the point where you can't identify them by that anymore, and they have to use DNA. So that's the problem. Everything is blending and mixing. So it's much more difficult now. Be Glorious Honey Farm says, Fred, do you use any hive monitoring devices, broodminder, etc.? I have a whole box full of broodminders, and unfortunately, I'm super lazy and didn't stick them in. I do have humidity and heat sensors, but where do I put them? I'm not putting them anywhere near the brood. I'm not putting them down in the hive at all. They're up in the feeder shims. And their sole purpose is to let me know if the hive's alive or dead. If the outside temperature is 27 degrees Fahrenheit and where I have my little sensors, which, by the way, are very inexpensive, they tell me what the humidity is. That's how I know it's hanging out in the 60s right now. And then it tells me if I have a 10 degree, 15 degree increase in temps. The only way that that would exist in the middle of the night is if the bees are alive. And that's kind of all I want to know. Are they alive or are they dead? So I have brood minders. You know what? We should do a giveaway of brood minders because they're super lightweight. I have to do that somehow. But I have them. I don't use them. And just because I have other ways to show humidity and temp. Let's see what else we have going on. We need to wrap this up pretty soon. Oh my gosh, it's 5:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, United States. Is witch hazel a significant source of pollen in fall? I have a lot of witch hazel in the swamp. Okay, witch hazel is not on the list. Here's the thing. Where can you go to find out what good pollen and nectar sources are, and where can you get them ranked? The Xerces Society publishes nectar and pollen quality and the amounts that come, and relevant to all pollinators, but also specifically they break it down for beehives too. So they have a book called 100 of the top pollen and nectar producing plants, and it's for the United States though. For those of you who are across the world, I'm sorry about that. But any pollen is better than no pollen. That's another thing. We talk about spring, and there's always somebody that comes up and says, Fred, you keep promoting dandelions. Yeah, I do. But dandelions have an efficient profile when it comes to their, the proteins that they're providing for the bees. Yeah, but it's all there is. So when dandelions are in bloom and they start to bloom profusely, that's when I know we're in swarm season. So there are a lot of sources out there that may not make the top 100, but still can be beneficial to your bees. And of course, there are some that produce only pollen. These are some of the things I'm going to talk about at Hive Life. So if you're going to be there, I'm going to try to wake up some thinking about some of the things I've observed on bees. It's very interesting, and I don't want to do any spoilers now. But it's very easy to look up. There's a lot of organizations that are doing quality checks. For example, witch hazel may be a great source in one state, in one region, and the very same plant or some subspecies of that plant may be available in another state, another region, and not provide the same things at all, because your plants are also dependent on the soil composition and the weather conditions where they are growing. So we don't get the same thing from the same plant in different areas, and that's true even in goldenrod. So there's a lot of variation here, and that's also why I hassle a lot of botanists and try to get them on board. I was talking to the Ernst Seeds people, and I had a good dialogue going, and then they just quit on me because I get into, I want to know the quality of the proteins, I want to know exactly what the breakdown is, and I want to know the nectar load on the plant. And then they stopped talking to me. Can you believe that? It was a sad moment. And by the way, this is my Murray McMurray hatchery mug with a bearded Belgian de Uccle Mille Fleur rooster on the cover there. But so what else? Melissa says, thank you back. I want to thank all of you, by the way, for being here today and putting up with a rough start that I had. I need to figure out this camera, and also I know I'm overexposed here. And let's see. James Brown says, I'd like to see you interview a horticulturist who knows the best tree species for bees during summer and fall. I planted trees, sage yesterday. Well, I know one of the top ones, basswood, linden trees. And there already are videos, by the way, and he's an arborist. He's not and he goes down the whole list of it. Very interesting. Here's my problem. I planted a bunch of linden trees, but you know what? I'm not going to be here when they get big enough and they're producing enough to really be awesome for the bees. But if you're in an area that has large linden trees, you can really boost your nectar flow. So that's pretty much it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope you got something out of today's live chat. I know it's been, my last live chat was way back in March. So, yeah, I'm super exposed right now. What the heck? But thank you for being here. And I want to thank Jen for being my moderator and making sure that the trolls took a thorough spanking on their way out the door. And I hope the rest of you have a fantastic rest of the week. And there's going to be, of course, a Q&A on Friday. And coming up tonight, there's a video. I interviewed the editor of the American Bee Journal. So you're going to want to watch that. He had very interesting stuff to say. So if you want to know stuff about behind the scenes at the American Bee Journal, I hope you'll watch that too. Thanks a lot. Have a fantastic rest of your day.